the stage. Yeah. So if there was ever so.
I will call the meeting to order. I will ask to stand if you can join me and do the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome. First item on the agenda is public comment. Does anyone have anything they wish to comment on that is not on tonight's agenda? And as we have in the past, people can go on the YouTube channel
Right.
and add their comment. Oh,
Public comment. Yeah.
public comment, go right ahead. Sure, you just go right to the microphone, please.
That I thought you could help me with regarding the test and stay policy that I assume is adopted from, it's directly from DESE, right? That's what you're following?
That's correct.
Okay, I have it here. I'm trying to read through it. So I just noticed in that test and stay policy that there's two separate standards for students, that vaccinated students that are asymptomatic close contacts don't need to test to prove that they are not sick, but that the second class citizen students who are also healthy must take a daily test to be allowed to stay and have access to their education. But Mr. With the glasses, I'm sorry, I will learn your names. I'm sorry, I didn't.
Stevens?
Ms. Stevens?
Mr. Stevens, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I'll get to know you.
Okay.
All of you eventually, I'm new.
Yeah.
And actually, I probably should have introduced, I'm Bridget, my kids are new here, and I just want to let you know what a phenomenal first week and a half they've had. They have been welcomed and they love their new school. So thank you, teachers, administrators, everybody.
Excuse me, Bridget, for 1 second.
Sorry.
I think we can take that up under COVID-19 updates.
So you don't want to answer the questions now?
Right, and so if we can wait for that, because typically what public comment is for something not on the agenda.
Okay,
And typically it's sort of people can ask their question and we get back to them because we're not allowed to have a conversation on anything not on the agenda.
So ask questions later?
What was that?
I'm asking questions later during the
Right,
COVID-19?
and so you would definitely get the opportunity under
Okay,
just a couple of pieces away.
that's fine.
Okay.
That's totally fine. Maybe you'll have answered my question. So.
I hope so, but I'm not sure. But we'll definitely get back. Okay, anything else not on tonight's agenda? Great, seeing no one. Any member of the school committee have anything they wish to bring up? Seeing no one. And Natalia, you are up, my friend.
Thank you. So for this week's update, starting with the MEC had a successful kindergarten orientation and first days of school last week, and pre-K orientation last week and the first days this week. It is great to see the students, families, and staff in person. Their teachers really seem to appreciate being able to work and play with the students in smaller groups versus the whole class. They are looking forward to a safe and fun journey this year. For the MKG had a wonderful start to the 2021-2022 school year, and they are excited to be back to learning. They are in the process of setting up their classroom routines and building their positive classrooms. They are focusing on their character strong word of the month, which is courage, learning that courage is to choose what is good, right, and kind, even when it is hard or scary. They are looking forward to their return to their town meetings in the next couple of weeks. This time allows for the entire grade level to meet to review items such as bus safety, school expectations, word of the month activities, mindfulness practices, and social thinking activities. They are looking forward to seeing their families at open house on Wednesday, September 29th from 6:30 to 8. More information will be sent home soon. For HBB, the HBB had a great start to their school year. The kids and staff are excited about being back, and they are looking forward to getting back to some of their normal events and yearly traditions, starting off with clubs, which they are now in which they are now in the process of organizing, and parents should be on the lookout for more information soon. The clubs are some of the clubs are first come, first serve, so it is important that they send back their forms quickly. Lastly, for MHS had an extremely successful summer and start to their school year. We began our school year with the annual summer freshman orientation, Start Strong. We were able to experience some normalcy and have fun to start the school year. We want to thank Elle Doherty and Zach Lowell for organizing this event and all of the orientation leaders for allowing this event to occur. Moving into the school year, we held our first school-wide pep rally since the beginning of COVID-19 last Friday. This event was a huge success and prepared us all for the upcoming year. We want to thank Mr. Breen for hosting this event and Mr. Brannigan and the Student Council Executive Board for their organization of the event. We had our first ever back-to-school dance last Friday with the disco theme. Everyone in attendance had so much fun. As for upcoming events, the annual Fall Open House will be held in person on Wednesday, September 15th, beginning at 6 p.m. This evening will allow for parents to visit the new high school and meet the teachers of their students that the student has this semester. This event will conclude at 8 p.m. The MHS School Counseling Department will be hosting the final workshop for the class of 2022 as part of the College Planning Workshop Series. This session will be held on Wednesday, September 22nd, 2021, beginning at 6 p.m. in the MHS auditorium. The focus of this workshop will be the nuts and bolts of applying to college. Thank you.
Thank you, Natalia. Does anyone have any questions for Natalia? Mr. Oakley, go ahead.
First of all, thank you for always putting those together. It seems like an awful lot of work, so I appreciate it. I wanted to ask you just generally, what do you think went really well the first few days back, and what didn't go so well?
I think, well, for the high school, the parking situation, that didn't go so well, but
Yeah.
that was expected. But I feel like for me personally, everything else went well. It was good to be back in person. Everyone was wearing their masks, which was good to see. So it was good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions for Natalia? So thank you, Natalia. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
At this point, I'll turn it over to the superintendent for the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, members of the committee, folks in the audience. Welcome. My first piece here is the COVID-19 update for the district. And I just want to tell you, as you guys know, as most of you already know out there, that the COVID-19 dashboard is back up. Last Friday was the first day for that. It'll be reinvigorated for tomorrow. Every Friday, it will be updated. And we had one positive case district-wide last week. And I would anticipate we may have a couple more based on my information that I have for this week. That will be out tomorrow and will be posted tomorrow. The Comprehensive School Health Services Grant, which is a grant that was designed to grow and expand health services as a result of COVID-19, had a competitive grant piece out there, and I'm happy to announce that Paula Magnesco, our school nurse, did apply for it. And we heard yesterday that we'll receive an additional $29,600 from that grant. So we thank Paula Magnesco for applying for that grant, and we look forward to expanding and growing our health services. On a side note, COVID-19 note, I did meet with the program director for PCC program, which is a summer program. Natalia, I'm not sure if you went to PCC at all,
I did not.
but many of your friends did.
Yeah.
But it is a program that has been in abeyance for a couple of years due to COVID, and the intent of that program is to start that program over again and try to get it kick-started to have that 6-week summer program at Stonehill College get reinvigorated, and looking forward to that and spreading that word amongst high schools in the area and trying to get that program back up and running. It's going to be a heavy lift, but it is something that I think is important for the well-being of those kids that really enjoyed that program and could enjoy that program in the future. Speaking as a former program director, I know Mr. Paul Brannigan was a former program director in the summer, but it is an important program for our youth, and I think hopefully it will get back up and running. That's a COVID-19 update that I have for the district. I know there was some questions in the audience regarding COVID-19, so at this time, I
Please.
think it would be.
Thank you, Bridget. I appreciate you waiting.
So as I was saying, I noticed the two separate policies. And as Mr. Stevens pointed out last week, very nicely to my son, he did a great job. He didn't use fear or anything like that. But he says that the benefit of the shot is to prevent you from not to prevent you from getting sick, but to reduce the severity of the disease, the need for hospitalization and death, which we know is not, kids are really a low risk for this. But with this in mind, if we cannot go back to the tried and true method of decades past in which we just kept sick kids home and sent well kids to school because we are bound by this DESE guidance, does it not make more sense to make one policy for all the children? Because we don't know if those vaccinated children are, you know, if they're a close contact, they should be held to the same standard as all the other children and either be required to test or quarantine accordingly, because this is what we're seeing now with the shot. So is there a reason why we would not make one equitable policy for everybody that has a close contact?
Mr. Chair, if I could, I'll try to respond to that, Bridget, if I could. We are rolling out a state program that the state has put out an offer for us to take up that offer, and we have taken up that offer. My understanding is that we have to abide by the state guidelines with regard to test and stay. And that those adoptions include the fact that asymptomatic, fully vaccinated close contacts do not have to, are exempt from testing and the quarantine response protocols. That's written into that program that we adopted, or we brought into the district as a result of that. So I'm not sure if that's going to change with the Delta variant.
But you could go above and beyond by stating that we're going to do better than that. We're going to ask all of our close contacts, because CDC did that in May by stop collecting data, and not having data is you know, detrimental, particularly when you're in an experimental phase of something. So we would need all that data. That's important data that the CDC failed to do. So it doesn't make sense to me that you would have two separate policies. And seeing as like Middleborough has already gone above and beyond what DESE is asking, because, you know, to have an exemption, you need to have a doctor's note. DESE doesn't require that, but you are. So you can see that you can exceed things where you want to exceed them. So you're not going below what they're asking, but what I'm asking is there a reason why we're going to implement a discriminatory practice by making two policies based on somebody's medical status, age, or religion?
I know you see that as discriminatory. I see it as a state program that's being rolled out, and we've adopted it. And we can certainly check to see if that's something that we can alter. And certainly the committee could consider that.
That's great. I'm glad that you're thinking that. I know it's difficult for me to hear that you can't see that there's discrimination when you base something on medical status or somebody's religion, but it is discrimination. So, all right. So the next question I had is, if you're not willing to allow your child to participate in an experimental test at school, your child has to stay home to quarantine for 10 days per that policy. Yes.
Yes.
And once, as long as they're asymptomatic, then they can return. Are those absences excused?
If they're close contacts, we do excuse the absences at our schools.
Okay, so if they have to stay home, then they're excused absences.
Yes.
How do they gain access to their education? So I know that the state is not allowing for you to offer remote, like a full remote option, but is there any reason that you can't offer quarantined students remote access to their education while they're stuck at home under that quarantine period?
Our teachers and our principals have been very good in trying to make accommodations and getting work to students, but we do not have the ability to remote teachers and classes to students at home at this time.
I feel like after last year, that seems like something you guys could do like this. I mean, you did
We
a lot of
didn't-
work last year to get it up and running.
We didn't do that last year.
You didn't do remote?
We
Like
didn't Zoom into classrooms.
Oh, okay. All right. That's different from our district. Okay, I didn't understand
Yeah,
that.
some districts did both, as you're aware, in the
Okay.
past, but we did not do that.
So, okay, so if you were at home, you weren't,
You had a separate teacher that taught only.
got you.
remote.
Okay, then I understand. All right, that
Mr.
answers.
Chair?
Yeah.
I just had a question kind of right on this. How are we determining actual close contacts in school? I know that it's just obviously changing all the time, and I want to make sure that I'm clear.
We are using the latest DESE guidelines, which indicates that close contacts are defined as individuals who've been within 6 feet of COVID-19 positive individuals while indoors for at least 15 minutes during a 24-hour period.
Okay, can I read what DESE says? Out loud. It says, in the DESE guidelines, it says classroom close contacts, an individual who is exposed to a COVID-19 positive individual in the classroom while both individuals were masked so long as the individuals were spaced at least 3 feet apart, is exempt from testing and quarantine response protocols.
I'm on the same page
Yeah.
as you
Okay.
are,
So I just want to
Teresa.
be sure that, I mean, that's different than what you're saying, so I want to be sure that all
So
the
we
schools
should,
are.
so it should be fairly minimal close contacts.
Right. That-
Most students would be excused,
They're exempted.
exempted
Okay.
from,
So we're going to follow that.
This is the guidance we are following.
okay. So hopefully there'll be minimal quarantine opportunities.
We truly hope so.
Okay. So since you are collecting data on how many students are positive, and then you have to trace how many close contacts you have, can you also actually keep track of how many of those close contacts become sick? I think that understanding how many people actually have active infections would help us for planning next year. And if we can collect the data on the vaccine status of the symptomatic students, so that we know what we're dealing with, because I don't want to revisit this next year. So if you're going to do all this contact tracing, can you then collect data on the, not just positive case and close contacts, but how many actually became physically sick or symptomatic?
We will have that information.
Oh, okay, so you do collect that, and then you'll understand from that, you can attach their vaccine status, because anybody who's volunteering that vaccine status to you, you'd be able to put that, not that I have to know who that person is, but then we would know how many symptomatic vaccinated students and unvaccinated students we had.
I would certainly hope to glean that information, be able to glean that information from the data that we have.
That's awesome. That would be great, because that's often left out of data sets when we see them, when they say like, oh, flu preventable deaths. They never tell you how many were vaccinated. So they just say that they're flu, vaccine preventable deaths, but they don't actually say how many of those deaths were actually in vaccinated individuals. So that's a piece of data that's often missing. So if you could collect that as part of your protocols, that would be awesome. The other question I had, it's my understanding that the Sandwich School Committee actually responded to DESE in a letter asking them to support documents justifying this mandate that they put in, particularly because they actually stated that kids remain a low risk for complications of COVID even when not vaccinated, but they're still choosing to mandate these punitive practices. So I'm just wondering if there's anything that this school committee could do in, like, I know your hands are tied, but can you fight for our kids? Can you send them a letter saying, please send us more information justifying why we're doing this to the least at-risk group?
I would tell you that when I established the agenda for this meeting, we didn't have the guidelines as of yet. So I would put it on the next meeting and have a sort of a broader discussion about it. And I think we can probably ask Paula to come in and look at it too.
Okay, so maybe we can do something to just get some more clarity, because it's really confusing. And this is kind of a rhetorical question, but if anybody can help me understand why we're targeting the least at-risk group rather than the high-risk group, which we know is established. It's the elderly, the obese, smokers, people with COPD. We know who's at high risk. We know who's at risk for hospitalization, for severe disease, and for death. And the ones that are taking up beds in the hospital, which seems to be the concern about overwhelming the hospitals, and it's not the kids. So if we're going to make mandates, to me, logically, if we were making logical decisions based on the risk stratification of each group, wouldn't it make more sense to put these punitive and coercive measures on the high at-risk group of the old? If your BMI too high, maybe you can't go into society if that's the problem. Or maybe if you're a smoker, you don't get access to go to work because you are putting everybody at risk because you are a high-risk person for hospitalization. Now, that's not make sense to me. It seems discriminatory to me. But right now, we are instead making these measures on our kids when they're not at risk. So it just isn't logical. If anybody wants to make that make sense for me, that'd be great. No? Oh, okay.
Just through you, Chair. Could you, this is the Situate School Committee?
This is a what?
Sandwich, she said.
Oh, Sandwich, okay.
Sandwich School Committee, yes,
All
they
right.
sent out a letter. I went to print it, but I didn't have
I was
time.
gonna say, if you could send me a copy of that.
Yes, I'll look for it again.
Okay.
I was trying to gather a lot of the stuff before I
I mean-
headed out here, but yeah, they actually put that together, and that's great. I know that you may not be able to do anything, but I really feel it's important that we do the best in the best interest of our children, and if that means, at least questioning why we're doing this. I mean, I know it's to push a vaccine, but question why that we're trying to, penalize these kids when they're the low risk group. We know they're the low risk group. So really, if there's punitive measures or measures such as mask mandates, but adults get to walk around restaurants and grocery stores and, make a choice, why are we doing this to the kids in the school? So
I'd be-
that's,
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
So I'd be happy to look at that.
awesome.
I'm actually chair of the COVID-19 subcommittee.
Okay,
So if you want to send me the documentation directly I know you have my email.
I'll have to look for it. I'm
It's
sure
the
it's on
G-
the internet.
It's G. Stevens at the Middleborough.
Okay,
all
I'll
that.
look it up, I'm
Yeah.
sure. All right.
But yeah, if you want to send me that stuff, I'll look at it.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean,
Okay.
even if you're just questioning, and if enough school districts are saying, why? Like, why are we doing this to our kids? They're not the at-risk group. Let's make logical decisions based on data and not punitive decisions to push a vaccine agenda, which is clearly, I mean, they said it, I mean, the lieutenant governor and the commissioner clearly made their statements that this is why we're doing this. So I'd like to do it for logical reasons and not for coercive ones.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
Any other questions about that particular piece or the COVID-19? Any questions from committee members? Brian, was that your COVID-19 report?
Oh,
Yes,
sorry.
I completed my report.
Okay, so,
I do have a
Go
question
ahead.
regarding the testing for the vaccinated kids that don't have to get tested. If we were to test them, would that be at our cost then?
see, that's what I don't know, and I'd be interested, that's why what I'm hoping to do is have Paula come in, put in our Dropbox what that policy is, so everybody can see it,
Okay,
and then we can ask questions for Paula. That's one of the questions I have, who has to pay for that particular piece?
right, because if it could be a budget question of
Right.
if it's not following the state
Right.
guidelines, maybe we can do it, but it's our funding.
Right, and that's what I want to make sure
Okay.
of and go from there.
Thank you.
Sorry, can I just ask another question?
Sure.
I mean, these funds are coming to you for COVID, so I mean.
Right, no, absolutely.
The funding is there. And I'm sure that if a student who was vaccinated wanted to be tested because they were nervous, you wouldn't deny them testing. So I feel like one policy could be a reasonable solution to not make a two policies that is discriminatory. But actually, the other question I almost forgot about was, it looks like they're only offering like a nasal swab. And I know that, I don't know a lot about it, I haven't looked into it, but I know my nephews in college were able to spit into something and test that way. Is that an option for them? Because I really have an issue with some of the testing, but I need to make some choices and need to understand my best options.
Yeah, and
I'm not sure if that's an option or
Right.
not through you, Mr. Chair. So we'll have Paula Magnesco, our nurse leader, at the next meeting to discuss the test and stay program and
Okay.
the state guidelines associated with it.
All right, if there's some alternatives, because right now all of the tests that's another thing that's in there. They have PCR tests. They're talking about the antigen test being used for test and stay, but PCR tests, which as of December 31st, they're losing their EUA. They're not being granted approval because they're faulty. So what happens, beyond December where you can't use the PCR? So we're going to have to figure out some other solution. I just didn't know. So these are all experimental tests right now, but that would be maybe, I don't know, maybe a spit test might be a little more reasonable.
other questions?
Yeah, I actually had one about the grant that was applied for, and we got what was it, 29,000?
29,000.
29,000. What do we plan on? Do you have any ideas what you would like to
This-
use that?
This is a grant that we just received yesterday, so we don't know, and we can ask Paula Magnesco at the next meeting to get more involved. I know Sarah Hickey was involved in it also.
Good, sir.
So if I can take that answer, Mr. Chair, that grant was, so when you write a grant, you have to say how you're going to use the money. That grant was written for professional development for nurses and for substitute nurse, for paying substitute nurses to come into the district.
Excellent. Thank you.
So if we can go back just a little bit to the PCC conversation. Given the fact that we spent this summer offering opportunities for kids for summer school to go to for free. And we do have ESSER money for next summer. I would really like us to look at and maybe come back to the idea of seeing if we can use money from those grants to pay for PCC. I could be incorrect, but I believe that happened in the past.
As it did.
And so I think if it's an opportunity for our kids to go to PCC, that if we can provide money for that, I think we should try to do that, especially with the grant opportunities that we have.
At least partially funded.
Right.
It's an expensive program, and can be, but because students go and they live at Stonehill and they eat at Stonehill and they get 3 meals, and it can be an expensive program, and there's a great deal of supervision involved in the program, so there has to be a lot of people hired for it. There's a core course in the humanities in the evening. They bring in special speakers, and there's a budget for that. So it is something that certainly would be something that we should discuss further at some point.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
So maybe we can look at it in the future.
Okay, moving on with my report to school reopening. Just in general, we had an administrative meeting yesterday, and I had a chance to discuss reopening in more detail with the principals. I was able to go to each school on the first day, and first day was a busy day, certainly at the high school, with 880 or so students coming in to a building for the first time in a long time. The floor didn't sink; everything seemed to go well. And but Mr. Brannigan reports that the school opening went very well. I think everyone or a lot of people are disappointed that the masks reappeared and we had to wear masks, and that's understandable. But it is something that everyone's living with, and so we're moving on with that. Nichols Middle School also reported a smooth opening, as well as the complex. Like I said, I was able to go to each building. I was at the HPB. I didn't get a chance to go up to MKG because I was escorting first graders down the hallway in a couple of instances, and those first graders, you forget the look in their eyes when they arrive at a big school like that for the first time, even though they might have been to an orientation, et cetera. So MEC then opened on September 2nd for kindergartners. I was able to be there that day. And again, those little eyes coming off the bus and jumping on the yellow line and walking down. And thankfully, we have the orientation programs that certainly help out with those students going to schools for the first time. But everything in the district opened up smoothly. Preschool opened up this past Wednesday, and yesterday, actually. And that went well also. So generally, a smooth opening. I want to send along kudos to our administrative team throughout the district, principals, assistant principals, coordinators, et cetera, for ensuring that did happen. And for, there was an increased anxiety level this year with everything going on. And I do appreciate all the work that they did to make it a smooth opening. So it's my quick report on the reopening of our schools. It's nice to see everybody there. We can't see the smiles as well. You can certainly see the smiles in their eyes. And in some cases, some students were reluctant to come into school because they just hadn't been in a while. And but it is something that we have people trained to help out with that, and I did witness that in a couple of instances, and that went well too eventually. So, any questions from the committee with regard to reopening? If not, I can move on, Mr. Chair.
Certainly.
The next order of business tonight is the Middlebury High School Handbook revisions. And we have, I believe, Shanna Milani is a teacher at Middlebury High School, and Andy Dizell, assistant principal. And they're going to talk about proposed handbook changes that need to be voted on by the committee. Welcome to you both, Shanna and Andy.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see everybody. I think it's important to note that these proposed changes to our handbook come after extensive parental, staff, and student input that was gathered by way of Google Doc at the end of last school year. Everyone had a time for them to take some thoughtful reflection on what they would like to see changed, altered in any way in our handbook, and all that information came in. And the administrative team met and went with quite a few changes that were recommended. Sadly, some of the recommendations we were unable to do due to circumstances beyond our control. However, what I submitted to the school committee maybe about a week and a half ago for their review is a culmination of all those efforts. And before I do begin, Natalia, October 15th, Mark your calendar. That's the date where we were promised our parking lot in the front. So parking at the high school, hopefully,
Good.
will be remedied October 15th. So again, mark your calendars. So the first part that I'd like to review is just very general updates, such as dates for open houses, parent-teacher conferences, et cetera. We're all updated. Names of locations. Obviously, when we're moving from one building to the other, we had to do a wholesale change in what things are called now. Dining Commons now was the cafeteria before, so forth and so on. The locations also of certain locations in the buildings obviously have changed with the new physical plant that we have here. In line with the governing bodies that we need to work with, we had to update honor society verbiage and academic standards to reflect the mandated changes that those national or regional bodies are now employing. Our school counseling department updated their school counseling goals for this year. And we also edited the academic requirement to participate in sports in line to the MIAA standard. So those were all general updates that were that we took cues from the natural move from one building to the other, or with other governing bodies that we work with. Very excited to highlight 4 new initiatives that are found now in the handbook. The first one I'd like to start with is the e-hall pass system, which is a system that we acquired last year. And really the impetus behind it was to respond to COVID needs. We wanted to have less exchange of paper, the physical exchange of any goods. We wanted to try to go as hands-off as we could. So we sought out this system that has been remarkably effective in our building and also at the Nichols Middle School, as far as I understand it. And very simply, staff and students have access to a URL where they punch in their Middleborough credentials, and they are entered into a system where they can request appointments with staff, whether it's counseling staff, administration, another teacher. They can request to use the restroom, et cetera. So it has taken over what we would have like a paper pass system or a physical entity to be passed back and forth. Further, it's actually pretty great from an administration's point of view because you can limit certain students' passes. If wandering becomes an issue, perhaps, it does allow us to limit the number of passes and locations of passes where we can issue to certain students based on need. And of course, that can change as circumstances change. The second piece I'd like to highlight is our in-school suspension space. So our in-school suspension model that we call ACE, for Alternative Classroom Environment, has been in use for as long as I've been there, for the last 20 years. But now we've added an element to it that I think it makes just perfect sense for the needs of today's students. So we were able to hire an excellent new staff person by the name of Mr. Ryan King, who has experience in transition spaces, working with students with social and emotional needs and deficits. And Mr. King will now do a two-pronged service for us. One, he will serve as the in-school suspension supervisor, monitor, if you will, but also that space, which is located right off of the school counseling department, is used for students to transition back into school from a lengthy hospital stay, lengthy absence for whatever reason, really. If a student has a social emotional need and they just need a cool down space, anything that we can do to academically support a student, but also support their social emotional needs, this is a great staff member and a great space for them to utilize. So that is a new highlight in this year's handbook. The third item that I'd like to highlight is not quite live just yet, but it is our new high school's Go to Blue security system. Go to Blue is a very new fledgling technology, but it's a very important one, and one that I hope that we never ever have to use. It is a two-faceted system where there is a computer application and mobile panic button devices that would enable a staff person to alert every cruiser in the district, a command center at Middleborough Police Department, and literally every screen that you see here at Middleborough High School that there is a true emergency happening on campus. And again, this is the caveat. I hope that we never, ever, ever, ever need to use this technology, but we have it in the case that we do need it. And again, under 0.3 of a second, basically the entire school community and first responders are notified, and everybody is coming here. When the alert is initiated, a two-way communication application pops up on every Middleborough High School device that is logged into currently by a teacher, and they can supply information as to the specific whereabouts of the issue. Any information that would be pertinent to first responders, they can communicate, teachers to first responders in the cruisers and in the command center at the PD, what's going on and where. So it is absolutely in line with our active threat policy, which we call the ABCs of MPS response options, where it covers certainly the alert and the communication, and it really does enhance both of those features. So that is a new addition to our handbook. And then the last piece that I'd like to discuss very briefly before I hand the mic over to Ms. Milani is a note on restorative justice. Now, I would like to think that not in name, but in practice, we have been a restorative justice school for quite some time, but now we're affixing the name to our practice. Restorative justice is a very conversational, engaging approach to school discipline that does not result in your standard in-school suspension, out-of-school suspension, expelling a student from where they really need to be, which is school. It is the act of bringing alleged, aggressors or perpetrators together in an appropriate time and environment, together with the aggrieved, to have a mediated conversation where at the end there is common ground, or as close as we can get to common ground, and a student is welcomed back into a classroom space or sitting next to a fellow student where there's not that awkward, I still don't like you, but I have to sit here because I've been told to. So it's bridging the gap between aggrieved parties in an effort to improve our school culture and really benefit everyone to create that all-inclusive environment that we're always seeking to achieve. So that's the end of my talk before I hand it over to Mrs. Milani. Does anybody have any comments or questions or concerns about anything that I've just presented to the school committee?
Any questions about those pieces from Mr. Dizelle?
Yeah, I have one. About the Go to Blue, is there one device for Go to Blue and one person has this? I wouldn't want that falling in the hands of a student by accident or some student just grabbing it, oh, click.
Certainly, no, there's more than one device. I'd rather not discuss the location of said devices here in this public forum, if you don't mind, Mr. Lewis. But I will absolutely say that there has been staff training, that we had wonderful assistance from Officer Wixton and Lieutenant Graham in the training and preparation with our staff in the days preceding our opening. The mobile devices are out and about in the school, but again, they're not yet live. And I want to highlight that it's not yet live because I made a promise to the staff that we would not go live with this until every staff member that has this at their fingertips is completely comfortable and responsible for this technology. So I want to make sure that we are 100% copacetic with having that before we say, Mr. Spellman, our contractor who invented Go to Blue, would like to go live. But there is more than one. They are in place right now, and I'd be happy to speak with you on that at another time.
Mr. Dizelle?
Yes.
More than likely, given that we do have new members, it may make sense to have an exec session around Go to Blue. I know from the building committee, we had one and talked about it. So it may make sense to have the conversation with the committee. That would obviously be an exec session because it would be a safety feature.
Certainly, I'd be happy to do that.
Any other questions for Mr. Dizelle? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, please feel free to tell me I should wait on this. There was a question in chat, but I think it specifically relates to one of the general updates that Mr. Dizelle mentioned around the updated school counseling goals.
Sure.
So maybe it doesn't work, but you tell me. The question was, I'd like to know what's happening with counseling for anxiety. Last year, we were told that there was not enough support, and I think this needs to be a priority for anxious kids. I know it's not directly directed at you, but I was just curious if you could respond to that.
Absolutely. In fact, if memory serves, the change to the goals was to support all students in their social emotional needs. But I will say also in response to that, that as far as I'm aware, per capita, we have more counselors and adjustment counselors than any school that I'm aware of. I have no data to support that. It's just anecdotal in talking to colleagues at summer institutes and things of that nature. And certainly in talking about school culture, we want all of our students to know very clearly, and I think that we do a pretty good job, but maybe we need to do better in saying, if you need anything, if you are not comfortable, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, find a trusted adult in this building that you can talk to. I can speak for the administrative team. Our doors are always open to students. And I'd like to say, again, I'm biased, but this is not the administration that we might remember from our high school experience, where you don't want to go there, you don't want to see that person. We are supports number one, absolutely and completely. We have 3 school adjustment counselors, we have 3 school guidance counselors, school counselors. We have a number of supportive entities and groups. And when I introduce Mrs. Milani, she's a co-advisor to one of those groups. I think we're pretty well versed in our offerings for support, and I just would urge whoever's out there that might need it to find me tomorrow. Find Mr. Brannigan tomorrow. Find one of us tomorrow, and we will absolutely get you the help that you need, or we'll do our darndest in trying to get that done.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Other questions? Mr. Dizell, I just had one question. You had mentioned before that there was the opportunity for students and staff to become involved. And I would, in looking at everything, I was wondering if you had sort of rough numbers for how many staff participated, how many students participated.
I would estimate across the board, it was between 10 and 15, right in that wheelhouse of parents and staff and students that responded. The biggest group that responded were students. I would maybe put them at 15 to 20.
Okay.
And they were mostly asking to wear their hats, which we've allowed. And we're gonna
Is that a
talk more-
percentage or
Talk more about that in a few minutes, but I need to wear my hat. That was the biggest gripe from students, but and we met them where they need us to be. So
And Mr. Dizell, is that a percentage or an actual number of students?
a number of students.
Thank you.
Yep, you're welcome. So I'm very happy to introduce Mrs. Milani, who is not only a fabulous English teacher at Middlebury High School, but the co-advisor to our Gender and Sexuality Alliance, along with Ash Barron. They do a wonderful job in supporting all students. And at the behest of Mrs. Lyons, who I believe reached out to Ash Barron last year to lead the initiative in looking at equity pieces in our handbook, gave that job to Ash and Shauna, who did an amazing job. So I'd like to turn the mic over to her and speak on some of the pieces that they were instrumental in getting done. This is Milani.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay, so Ash and I have been running GSA for several years now, and we work really closely with Safe Schools through the DESE, and we kind of have learned from them and worked with them to try to really make sure that all of our students are seen and heard, and making sure that that's happening in our handbooks as well as what we see every day. And so just having the GSA, we felt wasn't enough, that there was some more language we needed to add. And then because we went down this path, we found some other equity pieces that we could help out with as well. And so as you can tell, I'll just kind of explain each bullet as we go, but we just made sure that we had gender neutral language throughout the handbook. And I know last year you had worked on like focusing on families instead of just parents and guardians and that sort of thing. And so we've made sure that that was more inclusive. As Mr. Dizell mentioned, we updated the dress code, and we really wanted to make sure that students had access to whatever they needed to wear that was more culturally and religiously like inclusive. Okay, so just for this year as well as for years to come, so that kiddos feel welcome when they're in our hallways. And so we changed that language so that we don't allow hoods for a safety issue, which I'm seeing this year as being a really easy and clear-cut rule for teachers to follow, for students to follow. But we are allowing head coverings of most sorts besides astronaut helmets. And we are allowing hats because we no longer have the need to keep those in their cars or their lockers. We moved the anti-racism, non-discrimination clause and the statement on civil rights to the front of the handbook to really emphasize how much we care about all of our kiddos. We added articulation notes on names and pronouns, again, to emphasize how much we care about kiddos. So these are things we're doing in our hallways, but we wanted to make sure that our students, we were acknowledging our students' rights in their handbook so that they could then empower themselves when they choose to do so. We also added some language in the school counseling section to make sure that people knew who in the building that they could go to, some of those resources, and just allocating, again, to kind of touch back on that anxiety piece, right? Making sure that we're labeling who our people are so that the kids can find them. We articulated the legally protected rights of transgender and non-binary students for their bathroom choice, but we really wanted to make sure that all students have access to our like non-gendered bathroom. So there's a men's room and a women's room, and then a third option, I think on all floors. And so because of e-hall pass, because of the new building, we really wanted to make sure that that was labeled in the handbook as being a place that people can go and access. We deleted a section called gender issues from the athletic handbook. It just didn't feel like it was necessary or relevant anymore. And we just shifted language from gender identity to gender expression, mostly because when we think about gender expression, it better describes a person's need for access to resources and for bathrooms and for conversations with teachers and support from staff, okay? Whereas gender identity can be a totally like personal, non-school, right, related concept. And so I think that covers it. But we just really wanted to focus on looking forward and aiming to always improve our school culture before, like we have a really great school culture, but we want it to remain that way. And we're always aiming to improve it and make sure that the kids are represented in their handbook. And so we tried to take the time to do that this year. Do you have any questions?
Questions? Thoughts? Mr. Oak.
Sure. I mean, I'd just like to say thank you for doing all this work and being so thoughtful about the way that you approached it. A lot of stuff you covered, but it seems like it's moving towards making everyone feel completely comfortable, no matter who they are. So I appreciate that and thank you.
Thanks. My pleasure.
Other things? Then I believe we need to approve the changes to the handbook. So Chair will entertain a motion to adopt the changes to the handbook.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Discussion. Seeing none from the committee, does anyone in the audience have any questions or thoughts? Seeing none. Other than thank you very much for the, I know how much hard work you put into that particular piece. You know, I wish both staff, parents, and students, when given the opportunity, would become more involved, because the handbook is sort of the rules of how a school is run, and to give them the opportunity to comment, I think is fantastic. And I wish that more people would participate. So maybe we can help with trying to get more participation for next time. But with that, any other comments or questions? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you, Andy. Moving on with my report, Mr. Chair. Just this is more of a note. We had talked about facility use at the last meeting.
Yep.
And we had agreed that we need to expand the facility use piece to include this auditorium and include the track and field, and that we need to expand that current policy, which covers mostly inside facilities and sometimes outside fields, to be much more specific and with charges and such. So we need the policy subcommittee to convene and begin the process of looking at other school districts and what they're doing, and basically coming up with coming up with a new policy or an expanded policy on facility use.
And so that really relates to this building. The superintendent and I had a conversation with our athletic director. He's going to look at what the facility agreements are for other places. For example, we have the all-purpose stadium. We also have a snack shack that goes with it, those type of things. So it's just putting all that together so people understand that's going to entail. And also making sure that, there are pieces that fit into the custodial schedule, and then there be a structure for those that don't fit into the custodial schedule. So this is not about sort of what we've done in the past. It's about newer things.
Sure.
So
And
that's
Mr. Chair, to the policy subcommittee, this is not something that we're going to have to reinvent the wheel. We have a number of new high schools that have opened recently in the area, including East Bridgewater and Bridgewater Rainham and places like that have large facilities like this, that have outlined programs that are sort of similar. So we can certainly look at those. It'll be our own policy, but if people could look at that would be good.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Meg and I are on the policy subcommittee, and so we will set up a meeting and post it and do all that stuff. And with your blessing, and maybe Mr. Lynch as well, we'll invite Hutch to be a part of that.
Well, I would also invite the athletic director and the high school principal
Sure.
to make sure that they're available for that.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And the next piece of my report, if there are no further questions on that, is Sarah Hickey will provide a school finance report update.
Just a brief overview of everything that's going on. So thank you, Superintendent Lynch and Chairman Young and school committee members for having me here. I wanted to draw your attention to the agenda. You'll notice that we have a 2-page agenda that's stapled together, and there is a list of 62 resignations and new hires on the agenda to be acknowledged tonight. Every single one of those resignations and new hires is additional work that has to happen in the business office. People need to be added into the payroll system. People need to be walked through the whole benefit process. And I would like to thank Paula Reyna, Cheryl DeBenedictis, and Pam Butler for the work that they've done just over the past month, where things have been very, very busy with everything that's going on. The second thing I wanted to talk about is grants. So I come to you and I talk about different grants that we get on a regular basis. I want you to know that we're in the process of applying for, there's the regular grants that we get every year, Title I, Title II, Title IV, the IDEA, Individuals with Disability Educational Act grant. So all of those grants get reapplied for every single year. And so we're in the process of that. I'm hoping that those will be submitted within the next few weeks. And then I personally have been spending a lot of time on the end of year report. So as you know from previous years, in September, I put together a comprehensive analysis for the state of everything that we spent on the Middleborough Public Schools in the previous year. I have been working diligently on the end of year report. I want you to know that there have been some intricacies with the end of year report this year. In a normal year, we'll have 10, maybe 11 grants. Last year, we had 27 grants that were open. So it takes me probably a week to a week and a half to go through all of the information from all of the grants and assign where the money was spent in what category. And it's just a much bigger job this year. We're thankful that we received all the money that we had received, but this, now I'm paying the price with the spreadsheets. The last thing I wanted to talk about is budget. I know that normally you expect me to be talking about budget in January and February, and here I am letting you know that I have already started the budget process, putting together the spreadsheets for the principals to go out to the directors, and those will be going out in October. And so there's a lot of behind the scenes that happen in October, November, December, and then a budget will be brought to school committee, the budget subcommittee in January. But I wanted to just let you know that this is something that's already in the works.
Thank you. Any questions for Sarah? Thank you very much.
If not, Mr. Chair, we'll move on to summer programs. Summaries continued. As you know, at the last meeting, we heard from a couple of excellent programs that went on this summer. Tonight, we're going to hear from Justin Pitsley, who's going to talk about his reboot camp, music reboot camp. We're going to talk to Ryan Sylvia about his athletic programs. And Mr. Brannigan is going to represent the high school and Sean Kinney with regard to the credit recovery reboot program. So Justin Pitsley, I would ask you to come on up. And thank you for coming. And
Thanks, Mr. Pitsley.
Thanks for having me. It's very strange being this far away from you all. Last time I was here, we were right on top of each other. So thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit about our program this summer. We want to thank the district and the administration for allowing us to put this program together for our students. And this was born out of a lot of the ESSER stuff that was going on and trying to recoup some things for our programming. As you know, COVID took a real hit on the performing arts in particular in our programming with the restrictions that we had last year. It really limited what we were able to do. And so Mr. Brannigan approached me and asked, hey, could you put something together really quick here to put together a summer program? And so within a couple days, we launched a proposal. Thank you, Sean. And put together a 5-week program. And I modeled it much after a program I used to run at the college I attended for undergrad way back when. And so we put together this 5-week program. It was in 3 parts. The first 2 weeks were for elementary students primarily. 5th and 6th grade students were the biggest numbers. And it was designed to give them opportunities to kind of recoup some of that time that they didn't get during the school year. We had some students come in who never played an instrument, and so we gave them 2 weeks of opportunities to explore all the different instrument families and groups and pick an instrument they want to play, give them kind of a jump start. If we think back, our middle school students have lost a lot of time between the end of the previous school year, all of last year. They did not get the same type of opportunities. So they had 2 weeks of just intense focus with staff members on their instruments to improve their skills and abilities there. And we also offered opportunities for our singers and our theater students. And just really a dynamic staff that we had. I just want to really thank the group that we had that came in and worked with our students. They were just absolutely outstanding. Those first 2 weeks, we also had about 10 high school students in here volunteering to help with the younger students. And I'll tell you, there's nothing better than high school kids working with the younger students as a model that really fuels the program and inspires those kids to continue because they get to see what they get to do down the road. So that was really a fantastic opportunity. And then the 3rd week was a workshop week. Kids got to experience kind of a different angle. Some of them did some percussion. Some kids switched over to theater. And the final 2 weeks were for high school students and to kind of reboot our program coming into this year and to have an opportunity to work together with some leadership training and a bunch of different things we did there. In total, we had about 90 students over the 5 weeks, which I was incredibly happy with the short turnaround time from the launch to enrollment to the first week of the program. And competing with a lot of the students who'd already signed up for Summer Splash. We actually picked off a couple from Summer Splash. I heard from Christy Goldman very clearly that a couple came over to me, but we were very excited for what they did for Splash as well. But I thought we did very well. Some of the goals we had for the 5 weeks, I think you can see that on your screen over there, just to provide high engagement activities in the performing arts. Engagement with social emotional learning. We really focused on their well-being. We allowed them to kind of chart their own course with what we were offering. And we wanted them to feel good about being back together and creating, performing, or responding in artistic ways. So you can see some of our goals here. Those are the 3 weeks I just went over with you. Then here's just some pictures of our kiddos at work. I might know this guy with the M on his hat. May or may not be my middle child. And he's trying out some different instruments to find out which one would work best for him. I made a prediction before he even came in here, which one he'd end up on, and I was correct. But he's now our newest trombone player in 5th grade. But students get to try out the different instrument families and find the one that they thought worked best for them. And you might notice some other kids you might recognize in here. We had some percussion workshops with our students, and they get to try out the different percussion instruments in our brand new band room. You'll notice we had the opportunity to be mask-free this summer, which was great for them and for the performing arts, made things a lot easier in that sense. And so that was a good positive benefit we had at the time, using our dining commons space, and then using our black box theater with our lighting system in there. And we had kids come in, and I'll tell you, the kids in that program, the energy coming out of that space was just unbelievable. And I think those kids really enjoyed the opportunity to work with our staff in there and just have a great time doing that during that 5-week session that they had. And I think one final piece, I don't have a picture of it, but we offered a parent workshop. Something we've wanted to do for a long time is to sit down with our families and talk with them about ways to support the performing arts students. It sometimes looks a little different and it's a little more invasive at home, maybe than just like standard homework, because they're playing an instrument and it can be loud and they always want to do it in the space that's like right where everybody is. So we talked with our families about how to support their students as they're learning to become a performing artist in some way, and some resources to help them, and really try to engage the parents to help them, because retention is one of the biggest obstacles we face. And sometimes any barrier that's put in front of a student could mean they don't continue with it. So we want to make sure that families have every opportunity, every resource, and every strategy to help them keep going. Because as they advance in their school years here in Middleborough, the opportunities become greater and greater. And so we want them to develop in the younger years so that once they get up here, they have all the great opportunities that we have, hopefully post-COVID here at some time in the near future. So thank you again. Thank you to Mr. Brannigan and to the committee for supporting this program and for allowing us to have the space we needed and the opportunity to design something. The program was very popular. Parents, students were very happy with it. Our staff met at the end to talk about what worked and what didn't, and if we ever had the opportunity to do this again, and what that would look like. And I just really think it was a popular opportunity for students this summer. So
Mr. Pitsley, I guess the question I have for you is, given that we're able to do it this year for no charge for people, do you think if you had to, you could run it over a summertime with a fee, much like we do with the athletic programs?
yeah, that's something we discussed with the team that I had this summer, and actually with a number of parents and some of the feedback we got. They said we would be happy to, if this was a summer camp opportunity, to pay a user fee type of deal. I think the more we minimize what that looks like, the more successful we'll be with enrollment. But I do think that it was popular enough and that we can do enough with that. I think that would be a great opportunity if that's a path that we decide to go down.
And so I would tell you, as far as I'm concerned, that given the things that we do over the summer, it seems like a natural progression to me. So if, granted, this was a different summer in the sense that we had money available to waive fees, and I don't know that we can do that all the time. If you wanted to set up a structure and a program for the summer, I think we'd be open to listening to that and all across the performing arts, not just music, but obviously drama and everything else, because, I think the more opportunities we can give kids, the better chance they have. And we want to make sure, and the other thing too is I assume, especially with drama and to some extent music, it gives kids an opportunity to do something that they may not have a chance to do during the school year because they might have athletics or other after-school activities, so they never get around to it, but have always thought about, maybe I should try it out. So I think, again, anytime we give people an opportunity to look at something and do something, I think that's fantastic.
I think right now it's particularly important as we've lost a substantial number. Our numbers are way down with the COVID restrictions that we've had. So providing as many opportunities for kids to engage with this is going to help sustain us as long as we need to continue with what we're doing now. And the popularity of it just in general, I think, is definitely something that we want to build on as we move forward. And it'll strengthen our program across the board throughout the district. So we'll definitely be looking at that over the school year, and I'll work with Mr. Brannigan and see what plays out.
Other questions for Mr. Pitsley? Greg, go ahead.
I just have a kind of comment. Both my children were involved in this camp, and we had to plan our summer around it. We were told that they had to go, and they both, I think, they most enjoyed helping out with the little kids. That seemed to mean a lot to them. So thank you for providing that opportunity. And yes, I'd be fully supportive of continuing that program.
Mr. Chair, kind of loopholing this question in. It's not directly related, but I was just curious if Mr. Pitsley, by the way, thank you for running the program. It sounds like a great way to keep that pipeline at least semi-intact. But I was just curious, similar to sports boosters and stuff like that, is there a similar way that people can contribute to help music programs and kids afford instruments and stuff like that?
So we don't have a formalized group like MASBA in place. That's something we'd love to look at as we move forward to help with the performing arts. Certainly, each building staff has needs. I know last year we had a student that needed a violin, and we were able to come up with what we need to do, things like that. I think going through the building for anything like that, and then as we get closer to perhaps another summer programming, we'd look at how, if a student needed a sponsor or something like that. I'm not sure of the intricacies of those details and how to best answer that, but there are always ways to get involved. We're always pulling in parents to help. Our best years are when we have the most parent involvement. And so we don't have a formal group put together, but the parents certainly are a critical aspect of everything we do coming in to help out. So
Great. Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Pitsley. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pitsley. Speaking as a parent, I would tell you that my daughter attended the music reboot camp for a couple of weeks, and she very much enjoyed it. In fact, might have been the highlight of her summer outside of occasional softball tournament here and there. So moving on, I think we have Mr. Brannigan at the desk, and he's going to talk briefly about a credit recovery program that was expanded this year to include some interesting items, and Mr. Sean Kenny ran it, who was unavailable for the evening.
Right.
Mr. Brannigan, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Lynch, and good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I just want to thank Sarah Hickey and the district for making sure the fact that these programs could run and really utilizing the funding to be able to keep kids engaged over the summer. From the performing arts camp, and especially this credit recovery program that we also called Summer Splash. We ended up looking at the potential that we were going to have quite a number of students who were going to be retained as we were closing out this school year. And we could almost identify who these students were. And so the Summer Splash program that we created was really about a way of collaborating with all of our content areas to make sure the fact that we could give every option for students to be able to maintain their graduation years, that they would not be falling behind. And working with the department leaders in all content areas, we agreed the fact that students who participated in this program would be able to retain their credits to be able to move into the next scope and sequence of their academic program, which was huge. And then working with Sean Kinney, we decided to engage in our online learning platform that we used and from our online learning academy called Admentum. And we were really strategic about that because we really didn't know how many students were going to be engaging. And so we knew that with some potential, we were going to end up creating a little red schoolhouse where you would have a math teacher that would potentially doing Algebra 1 with Geometry and Algebra 2 all at the same time. And so utilizing our online platform, which is aligned to our curriculum, we knew the fact that whatever the dynamic this was to be, we knew that our students would be able to actually get the curriculum that they needed to be able to move forward. We were able to work with Sean to create the entire platform. We were able to hire content area teachers in all content areas to ensure the fact that we had a teacher in the classrooms, not just kind of sitting, making sure the student was on the computer, but actually taking the lessons from the online academy and really enhancing them to make sure we could personalize the learning and individualize the learning. Because one thing that's important for the school committee to know is that the students who participated in this program, and there was just about 40 students who did, that these students were probably some of the most reluctant learners that we had. So we needed to make sure the fact that we had the ability to personalize the learning. We also were able to work in the social emotional piece as well. So working with our school psychologist who was also part of the program, we had the counseling component there for students who were in need. But then also the fact that every day started with opening activities, team building events. It allowed for mindfulness activities where students were able to engage with our physical education teacher who was part of the program to be able to get movement involved, to get the students in the gym, up in the weight room, out in the fields, and to really make sure the fact that it wasn't just about coming in every day to work on their recovery of credits. It was really about building a team. And you saw this group of students that were some of the most reluctant of learners during their school year. Most of them were ninth graders, mind you. And then watching them come together in a summertime program where every day they were building a capacity with with the teachers, but also with each other. And it was really, really well done. And I think we had one student who did not make it. And all the others were able to actually get their credits, move into the next grade, or be very close to moving into the next grade, which has put them back on track for graduation. So I just want to thank everyone for that. I want to leave you with one story. I think one of the most reluctant ninth graders we had last year did the credit recovery program. And I was chatting with her on the first day of school because I pulled her into my office to just say how wonderful she had done the first day and in all of that. And I said to her, well, tell me about the summer, because I know you did the program. She said, I didn't want to go at all, but I ended up making such great connection with my teachers that I never had before. And I thought to myself, that's exactly why that credit recovery program was done. And now watching this group of students that are now 10th graders in particular, watching how they engage now is like unbelievable. And I really attribute that directly to the program, to Sean Kinney, Callie Bowen, and the entire teaching team of the credit recovery program. So it really, really was quite a success. So thank you very much for allowing it to happen.
Paul, can I ask a question? How, for the summer program versus, I know you added a January program, how has the January program numbers been? And are you seeing, what traditionally would happen, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if you had a bad semester, even though it was the first semester, you were coming back for the summer. Now you have the option to sort of bypass that, provided you don't have a bad second semester too. How have you seen both of those working out, and do you think they're both successful? That's what I'm wondering.
Yeah, I think that both of them are very successful. Strangely enough, we had more students engaged in the summer program than we've ever had before, to be quite honest with you. And I think because of the personalizing that between the teaching staff did, the school counselors and myself, of contacting each one of those families and saying, you really need to be a part of it. The winter school, which we had the good fortune of creating a few years ago, to your point, Mr. Young, does exactly that. It captures kids at the end of first semester. And we end up doing a crash course with them in the summer, and they can do at least one class that would allow for them to be able to get 5 more credits into their bucket. And what we have found is that sometimes those students who do the winter school piece, it allows for them not having to engage in any summer work in that coming summer. This past school year, we didn't have as many because everything, as you know, seemed off last year. So our winter school program actually happened in the month of April during April vacation. And we ended up taking over the middle school because of the move of the high school. And we actually did a week crash course with, I think we had probably about a dozen students who actually participated in that summer program. And many of those students who did that, the winter school or spring school ended up not needing to participate in that summer splash that we did. And most of the students that were in the April program were mostly upperclassmen.
Awesome. And I guess the other question, I guess the question I have is, maybe the one good thing that we've gone through in the past year is kids have gotten a piece of the remote courses. And so when they go to the extra learning, does it make it a little easier for them, Paul?
It does. I think that they've been able to navigate an online platform very well. I mean, I wouldn't say that people bend, do a backflip when they know they can do a remote experience, because it's very, very different. But I think because of the hybrid last year, and even some of the students who were fully remote, that being able to engage in that online platform for us that is aligned with our curriculum really was a game changer. So it allowed for students to be able to get the curriculum. It allowed for the teacher. I'll use Mrs. Thomas as the example, who was the math teacher who was on staff. She could have an entire room of students that were a pod of students doing Algebra 1, another small group doing geometry. And even though they're working on the online platform, she was able to actually then maneuver herself around the room to be able to actually personalize the learning, utilizing that entire experience. But then also we were able to track the students to make sure the fact that they were literally on point in meeting the benchmarks each and every week to make sure that they were going to be able to be on track to finish the class.
And I guess the other question I have too, Paul, is in most cases, a lot of these kids are our most difficult learners. And I'm wondering if you saw benefits for some of the kids going remote, in the sense that maybe they liked that better and did better and didn't have them coming to programs like this because they did well in remote as opposed to in a regular classroom and getting, you know what I mean?
Right. I think we definitely had students who thrived in the remote world last year. I think that the students who participated in the Summer Splash, the students who were remote, for some of those students, we really struggled to keep them engaged. And I think that this was an opportunity to bring them back into the fold again and to be able to get them back on track. Because as we know that last year in particular, there were circumstances that happened for so many of our students that were beyond everyone's control. And so to be able to provide an opportunity for them to be able to come back into the building, re-engage them back in in-person school, getting them inside the school to be able to engage with other students, to be able to engage with their teachers. I think when you had all of those ingredients come together, it allowed for all of those students to be able to come back together again and to engage in school. And I think that was a game changer, really and truly. We had one remote learner who really was in a space where they were going to be a fully retained ninth grader. And based upon all the work that he did this summer, that he was able to put himself in a position that he is a true sophomore starting in September. And so I think that even just for the psyche of that, it becomes like, all right, I'm back in action again. And I think us recognizing the fact that these students from all of our students in every place, that there was some bumps in the road for all of us. But I think to be able to offer that program this summer was an absolute game changer for students who I would have predicted we would have ended up losing at some point, or it would have been an unbelievable struggle to get them to the finish line.
And I guess my last question, I don't mean to keep asking questions, but this is a piece that really, I mean, because they are our most difficult kids at times, and they're the kids we want to reach out to. Do you see potential in running a program like this, not to make up for things, but to help throughout the year in a sort of a tutoring mode or something like that, so that we could give them extra, even if it's a remote extra, to be able to work on their time to some extent and help them navigate through the classes so they don't have to attend this program?
I think there absolutely could be. I mean, the online platform that we use, I think, is by far one of the best, and we've been very, very pleased with it. And I think that oftentimes it can only be used for the class per se, but it also can be used as a remediation piece. And it's important to note that before last year, our entire online program was all really based upon credit recovery. So it was students who needed to make up credits. They were short. We needed to give them some elective credit. And so they could pick a course out of the online academy. But it was never utilized in the way that we did last year. And when we utilized that online platform last year out of necessity, we ended up realizing the fact that there was some really good opportunities. And a case in point is really our American Sign Language class that we're running this year that was very popular. It's being totally done virtually through Edmentum. Because we knew the fact that that was an elective that students were choosing, that we had more students choosing that as an elective for those students who needed a course, and they loved it. And so I think what we did is working with Sean Kinney in particular, who organizes all of our online learning, that from his data points, he was able to collect to be able to look and see, well, how are we utilizing this program and platform? And what are the opportunities that we can be engaging students in moving forward of the lessons we learned, both the good lessons we learned and also the things that were those learning opportunities, so like we wouldn't do that again. And I think this is one thing, especially the summer program, that was a game changer for us.
Teresa had her hand up.
I was just going to say, as a parent of a freshman last year who struggled with the hybrid, the remote days, he was a very different student in school and out, and it was very clear. But as a parent, I want to thank the teachers because they were the ones that got him through. They really worked with him through those remote days. And I think if we hadn't gone back to full time, he may well have been one of those students there this summer. But it's a testament to the work that you do, Mr. Brannigan, and all the teachers in your school. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Oakley, you have a question.
Thank you very much for running it always, and it sounds like it usually leads to success. And so I was kind of curious if there is, you mentioned that there was a very small percentage of kids that didn't make it through to the end. I was curious if there's program-wide, if you have kind of rough numbers for how many kids end up fully recovering the credits that they need. Is it near 100% or?
Yeah, it is. I mean, we always have students who start the year off retained. There's always a small number. We treat them as the next grade. So if you have a ninth grader who's a retained ninth grader who now is no longer part of the class of 24, they're now part of the class of 25 in Aspen, we engage them as if they're a sophomore. They're in a sophomore advisory and all of that. And most of those students, by the time they finish the first term or the first semester, they have enough credits to jump into their formal grade. What I would say is that based upon the Summer Splash program this summer, out of all of those students, we only believe had one student who didn't make it, and it was simply because they didn't come. They just kind of just said, it's not for me. But all the other students were able to get enough credits that they either moved totally into their correct grade, their grade, or they're just shy a credit or two or three that by the end of the semester, they would be back in action again. So it put all of those students back on track to graduating on time, which is really what the goal was. Because we know the fact that especially for ninth grade, if they end up having a really rocky experience in grade 9, the research shows the fact that they're going to have a rocky experience getting them right to the finish line, and that ultimately some of those students wouldn't make it, period. So now that we're able to get them back on track again and a strong start in the fall, the trajectory is a lot brighter than what it would have been if it was not the opportunity to run this program.
Great.
So I thank you for that.
Mr. Chair, if I can ask just a follow-up. It sounds like this, to the truest sense of the word, this is an intervention in a way, and I'm speaking more in like a health sense, but I think we all had those moments where you just pull yourself out of your regular flow of things, you think about things a little different, and maybe it affects you later. And so I was curious if you have the ability to track the performance of those students that go to this credit recovery program long-term, to see if, not only do they just get back on track, but does it actually result in maybe a slightly higher trajectory than if they maybe had never gone. I know you'd probably need a control group to figure that out, but I'm curious if you have data on that.
Yeah, not in the immediate, we don't, Mr. Oakley, but it's certainly, I think as the year goes, you'll see that. But I can tell you one thing though, is a level of engagement in these students that you didn't have a year ago. I think that one of the biggest things that between the work of Sean Kinney and his team is they helped students understand the concept of connection, that what they're doing in a classroom academically and the connections that it has to the greater scope that school makes sense. I think that is really where you're seeing it now. The engagement in school, their entire kind of persona in school since the start has been very, very different. And I think that's because they understood actually, or were able to see that what I do in the classroom, and if I engage with what I'm supposed to be doing, that everything starts to make sense about why I'm here every day and what the future holds for me. And I think that alone, just by the engagement piece, is different in a good way.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Bernigan. And now up next is Ryan Sylvia, who's going to provide a summary of what went on this summer down in the gym and the fields and his athletic program. So welcome, Ryan Sylvia.
Thank you, Mr. Lynch. Thank you, school committee, for having me here tonight. Yeah, it was a little different this summer. This program has been in place. This was the 4th year. So this is not a new program, but a little different, just seeing the Summer Splash kids around and the music program. Did Mr. Pitsley leave already? I was going to tell him that I used to be a trombone player too, because the music teacher said I had long arms, so I had to hit the low note. But anyway, we had 291 participants in grades 3 through 12. This is a fee-based program, so basically the fees cover the costs associated with the program, with coaches and equipment and things like that. We had 9 different sports, girls and boys soccer. We started a new endurance track program, which was a huge success with Coach Smith. That was a middle school all the way up through 12th grade, and even some post-grads, volunteers coming back. The strength and conditioning program continued, and it was a huge success just based off the fact that we had the new facility for the kids to take advantage of. Girls and boys basketball, field hockey, swimming, volleyball, and majorettes. And the way we structure this program is basically we give every head coach an opportunity to run a summer program in a way that fits their schedule. The basic structure of it is a 4-day program, 4-day clinic for our younger students, really geared more towards our middle school population. Move that back a little bit. Towards me? Geared more towards our middle school population, and also some of the elementary grade levels. The biggest kind of takeaway was just getting our student athletes in our new facility and getting them excited about that. That was probably the biggest, the biggest impact this year. And then also getting them in front of our coaches, our varsity coaches and their assistant coaches, working with them. And then also we have some student volunteers in certain sports that are there helping out with the younger students and getting some volunteer community service hours at the same time. But that's basically the update. It was a successful program. We ran the full summer and just had to coordinate the facility to make it work. So everybody had their own space.
Any questions for Mrs. Silva? Thank you, Ryan. We appreciate it. And thank you to all the coaches too.
Thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Have a nice weekend. And Mr. Chair, that concludes my report for the evening.
Excellent.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yep, go ahead.
There were some questions that came up on the feed relating to some of the stuff on the report. Can I read those now?
Go ahead.
All right, the first was circling back to the asymptomatic vaccinated children electing to have tests. I guess that's a question for next week,
Right.
next meeting. We can
Right,
put
we'll
that on
have
the
that
agenda.
conversation.
Then they ask about, another question about ventilation systems in the classrooms.
What's the question?
What are they?
Yeah, are there ventilation?
Are there ventilation systems?
Yes, every single room has an HVAC system in it that circulates the air. And we also have air purifiers in every classroom.
Okay.
Yep.
And the last one I got was something about parking at HPB. Can something be done about the HPB parking lot that was just repaved? It's chaotic at pickup. Cars are sneaking through parked cars, and a kid is going to get hit.
Have they addressed that with the principal? That would be the first step that they would need to take.
All right.
Yep.
Okay.
Bring it to the attention of the building level administration, and they will hopefully address
The
it.
person should contact the principal of the HPB.
Yep. Derek Thompson, the principal of Henry B. Berkland School, would be, I'm happy to speak with that parent and based on their observations, go out and make some observations of his own.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Oakley, did you have anything that was related?
Nope, Greg and I were on the same page there.
So since we're back to our agenda, I'm going to skip over our agenda for a minute. I'm going to go to the school resource officer. So Donna, you had asked us to put on the agenda. So I know you spoke at last meeting and I had to send a text to Mr. Oakley, and I apologize for that. But part of the open meeting law is we're not supposed to discuss things that aren't on our agenda. So I would open it up to you now, Donna. Go right ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for adding it to the agenda, Rich. I really appreciate it.
No problem, Don.
So tonight, there were a few parents here to speak regarding John Graham. I know we touched upon it at the last school committee meeting. I know there were some things that were said in regards to what we could potentially do. So what we're looking to do right now is to find out from the school committee essentially where these stand with maintaining John Graham in the school system. So I know that, I guess let me start with this. We're here tonight to talk about Lieutenant Graham. There are many people regarding parents, students, teachers who in the school system would really like to see Lieutenant Graham continue to stay. We felt it was really best to limit the number of people that come here because we don't want to make this into a bigger issue than it needs to be. But again, there are some people that are here tonight to speak on behalf of him. Overall, I think we all know the importance of keeping Lieutenant Graham in our school system. Over the past several weeks, I've reached out to the selectmen. I had a conversation over Messenger with Leilani Dalpe, sorry if I mispronounced her name, the chairman, on August 15th, where she stated she would look into the situation. I received a response the next day, and her response was, and I'll quote what she had said to me, "The structure is very clear in the union contract, and lieutenant does not have the same duties as a sergeant. If John did not wish to advance his career, he could remain a sergeant." On August 17th, I responded to her that the SRR job can be interchangeable. The union contract does not specify nor stipulate the SRR position, and it has to be a certain rank. I'm sorry, that the SRR position has to be a certain rank. The union contract is online for anybody to read. And I said to her, this pretty much, from my understanding, comes down to dollars and cents. Can we make it work in the school system? On August 25th, because I did not receive any response back from Leilani, I forwarded my conversation to the entire selectmen in hopes of receiving an answer from one of our elected officials. I did receive calls from two of our selectmen, Mark Jermaine and Nathan Demers. The conversations with both regarding the importance of maintaining Lieutenant Graham. Both individuals stated they would look into and follow with me. As of today, I've still not received a response. I think it's important to note that yet again, one of the selectmen stated that Lieutenant Graham had the opportunity to not accept his promotion. And I know someone else will also touch upon this, but I really found it disgraceful that our town and our selectmen would feel it was okay to use as an excuse to push the blame on Lieutenant Graham for him leaving the school system. And I think it's clear for everybody to understand that he did not vacate his position, he accepted a promotion. I also feel it's important to share that the same selectman stated that I did not believe in our police in this town to be able to do the job of Lieutenant Graham. I think it's important to note, as I said last time that I spoke, that I believe every officer in this town and each of them are trained to respond and protect. What I have said and what I stand by is the relationship that Lieutenant Graham has established with the students, the parents, the teachers, and administrators. This is not something that happened overnight. This is something Lieutenant Graham has developed through the years, not only by volunteering his time, by running a softball league, but by taking this position 3 years ago. Over the past 3 years, Lieutenant Graham has been at most of the athletic and after-school activities. He's at the open houses, parent-teacher conferences, student government, just to name a few, and I know some of those are required. He has taken the SRO position to the next level, and he has created an environment in which people feel safe. Again, relationships. The town has decided that what he has done is not important. That's my perception. And to me, the town has said that my daughter's life is not important by putting a price tag on his salary. The officer that is replacing him can do the job, protecting and responding, but the town gave him 15 days to develop that relationship, which Graham has done over 3 years. Make no mistakes, I understand that by keeping Lieutenant Graham in the school opens up other opportunities within the police force, and it causes a ripple effect resulting in more money. I have to ask you, should we be putting a price tag on our children's safety, especially in today's climate? I'm sure many people have thought that, not my school district, but we cannot think that way, and what Lieutenant Graham has done should not be looked at lightly. In closing, I think I've said to you previous that I'm a daughter of a New York City detective. I have never been more proud to say that than I am today. My father was in charge of all the detectives in his precinct. He stayed with his precinct through all his promotions because of all the relationships he had developed in his area. After the 9/11, the police commissioner, Ray Kelly, called my father and asked him to return because of the relationship he had established throughout those years. As a school system and as a town, we need to understand the importance of Lieutenant Graham. If you have any doubts, you need to ask the teachers, the administrators, speak to the parents, the students, but please do not turn this into a price tag for the children's safety. I'm now going to pass this to a former student who's going to come up, Tegan Ambrose, and speak on behalf of John Graham.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Tegan Ambrose. I graduated last year, and having Lieutenant John Graham in our school made such a difference because I remember what it was like before we had him. The second he stepped through the doors of MHS, he had a constant smile on his face and made an effort to say hello to everyone who passed by. He's the type of police officer that gives cops a good name and makes kids feel comfortable around the police rather than intimidated. He made every student feel safe and welcome. He's such a kind person and always made sure everyone knew that if there was a problem we had, that we could always go to him and talk about it. In the old school, I'd see him roaming the halls, talking to students and teachers and keeping our school safe. He did the same thing in our new school as well, but now he has an office where he made sure his door was always open for us. He still roamed the halls, kept an eye on things, and made sure everything was going smoothly. He would always make time to ask all the students how their sports team is doing and just how things were going in general. I can't remember a sporting event that he did not attend. Lieutenant John Graham is just a genuinely nice person who I think is a great asset to our school system. His presence helped us feel protected, and he always showed up with a smile on his face, and I think it would be a shame to not have him here anymore. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to speak? Go right ahead.
Hi there, Lynn McDermott. I've been a bus driver in town since 1999. Same thing she just said. I agree with all the same things about Officer Graham, except I didn't graduate last year. He's great to all the bus drivers. He's great to all the kids. We see him in a different light. When he's outside directing traffic, he's always going to hello for somebody. He is a great guy, and it would be a shame not to have him here. And I can't say enough good things about him. If he can be kept here, I think it would be a good thing. That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Thank you very much. Hello again. Andy Dizel. I'm wearing many hats right now, concurrently. And I think I have some unique perspective that I hope that the committee finds valuable. I am not only the assistant principal here, I am the chairperson of the district emergency response team. And I've had the very good fortune of working with all of our SROs, past and present, in a myriad of different ways. And I'd like to say that we are exceptionally lucky to live in a town where our school system and our first responders, the police and fire departments and Brewster, work so incredibly well together. We communicate, we train together, we talk to each other, and it's all under the umbrella of keeping our kids and our communities safe. So we're very lucky to live in a community where that happens. I congratulate Lieutenant Graham on his promotion, very well-deserved promotion. I congratulate SRO Wixton on his appointment. I've had the good pleasure of knowing Brian for quite some time as a student athlete and now an officer in the town he grew up in. And no matter how things fall out, Wick is going to be a great addition to our team. Officer Trask started the same time, I believe, that I did as chairperson of the DIRT team. And he was my first experience working hand in hand with an SRO. He was an exceptional SRO. He was one officer charged with the task of doing the job of 5 people, having to be at 5 different buildings, constantly rotating, constantly making relationships happen, making the kids connect with law enforcement, connect with their community, and feel safer. He was an exceptional SRO, but I think it was exhausting for him to go all around town. We were fortunate after Sergeant Trask left us, in came Sergeant Graham, then Sergeant Graham, and Officer Phillips. 2 officers able to do twice the time, twice the presence, twice the relationships. An incredible asset, and I think a real feather in this district's cap to say that we have not 1 but 2 SROs. I think it's good practice in life is when you find a really valuable employee or an asset, you work to retain it. And to be totally candid with you, I don't know whose hands are tied. I don't know if this is all a moot point talking to you right now, but I think I would wake up with regret if I didn't come before the board as an employee and also as a taxpayer and a father of 2 young children in this district, that I feel very strongly that we are better with Lieutenant Graham than without. And I would just be remiss if I didn't say that in this venue. I think that he has been a true resource to the students and the community. I think that he's been very responsive. I think that his attendance and his engagement has been through the roof. And that's it. That's what I wanted to say. I think he's a great asset for us, and it would be a real shame if we were to lose him. Thank you.
Thanks. Sir, come on.
Good evening. My name is Ron Parkinson. Mr. Lynch, School Committee, thanks for having me here to speak with you guys tonight. I just had a quick question. How many students are currently enrolled in the district?
A little over 3,000.
Just about 3,000, a little bit plus 3,000.
Okay, thank you. It's going to kind of, whenever I'm going to speak about something, I do my due diligence and kind of investigate what exactly it is I'm talking about so I quite understand and can properly promote what I'm trying to present. And to reiterate what Mr. Dysel said, you know, we have multiple schools with only 2 offices. Well, those offices are trained by an organization called NASRO. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with it, but it's the National Association of School Resource Officers. This is an organization that we send our police officers to be trained and then certified. In fact, multiple agencies in the Commonwealth and in the country send their officers to this one particular organization. Well, this organization adopted a philosophy that their industry standard for the number of SROs deployed per student is 1 SRO per 1,000 students. So with that being said, I'd like to ask as a taxpayer, as a parent, that we meet that minimum requirement and 3 SROs assigned to our school system. Lieutenant Graham and Officer Wixton, I think would be, with Officer Phillips, I think would be a great team. And as far as the selectmen, you know, they're not, I'm not going to say they're not educated in this area, but they're not law enforcement. They're not educators. That's our job as law enforcement, as educators, to let these folks know exactly the importance in this particular area. And, you know, I'm going to compare, like kind of what Mr. Dysel said. Every sporting event that I've attended for my kids or for my friends' kids, because I'm heavily involved in this community, I see Officer Graham there. And I know it's not a requirement. I know it's not a requirement, but he's there because that's his investment in our community, and he takes his job very seriously. And as a result of that, we've seen the success. I don't think anybody's going to argue that. Past SROs, I haven't seen that, and I'm not discrediting them. Again, it's not a requirement. Not everybody has the ability or the opportunity to be able to do that. Fortunately for us, we have Lieutenant Graham who can. Kind of like Mr. Brannigan, I see him at everything. You know, we are so lucky as a community to have people like Principal Brannigan, Lieutenant Graham, that give their time for our kids. And I'll be forever grateful for that, and I'm sure the community will as well. So again, in closing, I'd like to say as a taxpayer, as a parent, I really would like to see a way that we could implement the 3 officers in our SRO program, meet the industry standard that's required. Lieutenant Graham being one of them, Officer Wixton, Officer Phillips, it'd be a great opportunity for Lieutenant Graham to take Officer Wixton under his wing, teach him everything that he knows so he could be just as successful as him. And we're only as a community going to benefit from it. And I don't know what it needs to take to make that happen. I don't know whose support we need or who else we need to speak to, but I think it's imperative that we do something like that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? So I just want to say a couple things. First, this. Have you guys had a conversation with the chief?
No.
Okay. So I would tell you this from my perspective. I don't want to start off on a negative. I want to start off on a positive. And I agree with you, Donna, that I'm not going to sit here in any way, shape, or form or blame anybody for taking a promotion that somehow this is their fault, right? So I think it's a great thing that Lieutenant Graham became Lieutenant Graham. It shows that the police department think of him highly, and clearly everybody here shows that everybody thinks of him highly, and I've seen him at a wide variety of events. I know how administrators feel and everything like that. That being said, I will tell you, I believe that the structure of the police department is the structure of the police department, and the duties that lieutenant are decided by contractual means and also by the police chief. And also where SROs are assigned is decided by the police chief. And so Sergeant Graham was promoted to lieutenant and assigned certain duties that were given to the lieutenant. In order to have that conversation about a 3rd SRO, I think that conversation, we can have that conversation, but it's going to be included as part of our budget discussion. And I'm also going to include people from the police department, mainly the chief, to come down and talk about it and have conversations with the school committee and the superintendent about what adding a 3rd SRO would mean and what that would be. I don't mind having that. I think it's a good point to have and to be able to do. The school committee doesn't have anything to do with the assignment of SROs. SROs assigned by the police. And that's the way it's always been. Thankfully, we have a very good relationship with the police department. And I know, and Brian, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in the most recent hiring, Joe invited you and Paul to meet with the candidates.
Asked for our input.
Good. So go ahead, Donna, please.
So my understanding is that, and I don't want to speak on behalf of Chief Perkins, that Chief Perkins is, from what I understand, more than happy to keep Lieutenant Graham in the school system. There seems to be some red tape between the selectmen and the town manager. However, we're not getting any straight answers. So it seems to be that everybody that we go to has a different course of action to take, but there are no answers being made. And in the meantime, we're at risk of losing Lieutenant Graham to another individual who will only have spent 15 days in the school system to get trained. And that's a huge concern, because that individual, although a great individual, has not had the opportunity to develop any relationships with any of these students. And if we're continuing an SRO type of opportunity in our school systems, there should be some type of basis of promotion of an individual that's worked with these kids prior before bringing someone straight in from outside. And I think we all know the climate of what's going on out there today. And I think we all know you yourselves have been victims of threats made by the population within the town of Middleborough. Mr. Graham, or Lieutenant Graham, excuse me, has been right on that. He has the pulse of everything that's going on. And it's upsetting as a parent and a taxpayer that it would be taken, I don't want to say callously, but that nobody seems to be able to give an answer to the parents to understand why we cannot consider to keep him in the school system.
So my understanding why he can be in the school system is he was promoted to lieutenant, and the lieutenant job has specific duties assigned to the department.
But the contract also says that a lieutenant can be in
I'm
the
not,
SRO position.
I'm not talking about the contract. I'm talking about that specific duties that are assigned to that position, and that's why he can't. Now, I will also say, and one thing that I want to make very clear, Donna, I have full confidence in the chief for whom he selects for SROs. He selected the SROs in the past, I think done a fantastic job. He selects people that make sense and have been valuable members of our community. So I don't want to diminish that at all.
So I just want to be clear, at this point, there's not going to be any other additional means made to retain Lieutenant Graham in this position, unless we go to the town manager or Chief Perkins to discuss this further.
I would start with a conversation with Chief Perkins.
Okay?
Okay,
All right, thank you.
thank you. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair.
Sure.
While I realize that the school committee cannot have a say here.
Yeah.
I do think maybe it makes sense for us to sort of give that support of this conversation. I mean, as a parent, I completely agree. And I mean, I can tell you my senior that just graduated last year had a great relationship with Lieutenant Graham, and my sophomore also does. So as a parent and as a school committee member, I would say, that I support any conversations between that group and the chief, and maybe just perhaps we can sort of give that school committee support as well, just publicly. I don't know what that looks like. Obviously it's not a vote, I get it, but whoever would be in support of that maybe could just say, we want to see this conversation continue and see where it can go.
I just think, I agree that people can have that conversation. I think that it's difficult given my concern more than anything else. And as we all know, we have concerns when people step into our areas and have conversations. I do have concerns when an area is not under our control, stepping in. And so I would be very reluctant to do that. I am perfectly fine with people as individuals, obviously, having conversations with the chief and having conversations with the selectmen, anything like that. But I would be concerned as a committee to overstep our role.
Sure.
I know that the SROs are in our school system, and I understand that. But it is not a function that we get to decide on. And so I respect, and I can't emphasize this enough, and I understand why people, bring up Lieutenant Graham. I get it. Lieutenant Graham's a fantastic individual. He's been awesome for our community, especially the school community. But I will say that these things are not dissimilar to what happens in school systems. We have people promoted, and they have to make choices about their promotion. We've had people promoted to administrative positions, and that meant some of them couldn't do other extracurriculars, some of them couldn't do classes that they had done before, those type of things. So I understand that point. And I would just hate to overstep what really in my mind is out of our realm. And so I would encourage everybody to have that conversation and continue to have the conversation. And I'm sorry, Donna, that the conversation didn't go well with the selectmen, and I don't know why. But I would have that conversation at the chief office first. Okay. And to the gentleman up there, I will promise you that we will, as part of the budget conversations, have that conversation about an extra SRO, because I think that's reasonable. And given how we've grown, I think it's also good to look at. So I don't want you to think that piece was taken away. It's just, in my mind, the process that we go through to get there, if that makes sense. And I'll be more than happy to have conversations with you about that aside. No problem. Any further questions about this? Thank you. And Donna, I'm sorry that you're obviously not getting the answer that you want, but no, and I thank you. And like I said before, it's just that opportunity to talk about it. And I would say to anybody out there, if there's a piece that people want to talk about, please just email me or the superintendent, because what happens is the public comment is you can talk about it, but we can't. And so by bringing it up and putting it on the agenda, it makes it the opportunity to have a dialogue and at least have some conversation. And also, like I said, to look at things in different lights, like the gentleman had mentioned, the extra SRO. And we can continue that and go from there. So thank you, everybody. And with that, I'm going to move on, if that's okay. So at our last meeting, the superintendent's evaluation was discussed. The superintendent had an excellent evaluation. As part of his contract, if the superintendent has a good evaluation, he gets a salary increase. And so the chair would be open to people's thoughts on that. Mr. Oakley.
Mr. Chair, I remember we've obviously done this before.
Yes.
I can't remember the specifics, though. There's some sort of guidance for what that increase looks like.
So there's an open, there's no necessarily numbers attached to it. It has been our standard policy, given that the superintendent, the level the superintendent has been evaluated at, that for the past several years, we've given him a 3% raise. And I will tell you that that stays in line with superintendents across the district and also maintains our district as being competitive in sort of the superintendent salary structure.
Sure. So in that case, then, Mr. Chair, I would certainly, given the rating that we as a committee gave Mr. Lynch, I would certainly support doing that again at that level, if it's something that the committee agrees with.
Do I have a second for that? For discussion.
I'm sorry, are you recommending 3%?
I move that we give the superintendent a 3% increase.
I'll second that.
Okay, and discussion. Go ahead, Greg.
Okay, so, yeah, I mean, honestly, I think this is the best review we've given Mr. Lynch. I mean, he started off good and he just got better. So I see no problem with that in this environment. I mean, I know all the administrators worked overtime this last 2 years. I mean, crazy amounts of overtime. So yeah, I feel very comfortable with the 3%.
Other comments or questions?
Nope.
Seeing no one. Any questions from the audience? Hearing no one. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Then thank you very much.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you to committee. I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Did want to note that all of our principals did give 3% also for this year.
Thank you. And thank you for your fantastic work. I didn't get to comment on the evaluation because I wasn't here last time. The other thing that we had presented to everybody was the operational protocols for school committee. First and foremost, that is an operational protocol that we have used for the past several years. Given that we weren't meeting in real person, that's why we haven't updated it since. These are from Mass Association of School Committees. I don't believe you guys have attended the Charting the Course yet, but the Charting the Course will essentially outline all of these pieces. These are sort of our guidelines so that we function well as a committee, we function well with the superintendent, and I would welcome any comments or thoughts on anything. Yes.
Charting the course in person again, or is that still being remote?
What was that?
The Charting the Course program, is that still being offered? Is that in person?
That's a great question because I think it's in person. I'm not 100% certain.
So I highly recommend, I did that my second year, and it's really illuminating about everything we do, and particularly around the budget. Yeah, it was really, I can't emphasize enough. It's like a half day program, but I'd highly recommend it for.
Do we know when that is?
It's on the MS.
Yeah,
So
they're
where-
a little
yeah, where-
further away though. I think there's one in Pittsfield, so you're more than welcome to go to Pittsfield for a nice drive.
Hey, you want to go to Pittsfield with me?
The birthplace of Brian Lynch.
Mr. Chair, it looks like there is one at Berkshire County Community College. Is that the one? And it looks like it's
Pittsfield.
September 18th.
Yeah.
So coming right up, I don't know if registration is still open, but I would piggyback on what Greg said, that the most valuable part for me, I think, I mean, obviously the presentations were great. The most valuable part for me was talking to other school committee members and learning about how things go in their districts and, you know, hard lessons learned. And it was very valuable. I'd really recommend it.
I think the other one's in Charlton, Mass, which is
Oh, that's
again, a
what you
little,
got.
It's a little closer.
They try to move around, so.
And what's the website that we can go to sort of find this information?
MASC.
Yeah.
MASC.
MASC.
MASC.org.
It's more in Charlton's more in central Mass, right?
yeah, it's up by Worcester.
Yeah.
That's more exciting. They
Yeah,
usually
yeah.
run them,
Where I grew up.
they
Teresa's old
rotate
stomping
them.
grounds.
Yeah.
They rotate them all around, to be honest with you. So when I see them, I'll let everyone know, but I'm pretty sure it's Charlton and Pittsfield, and I didn't think everyone's going to Pittsfield, so I'll ignore that one. So any further questions on the operating protocols?
Nope.
Then Chair will entertain a motion to accept the operating protocols.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Did I hear a second?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Sorry, a little further away. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous, and the chair will pass this around to sign. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Sorry.
So one thing I did put on the agenda was the meeting dates. I did have a request from Zeke. The second and fourth Thursday of the month interferes with his work, if I'm correct, Zeke.
Yes.
So Zeke asked us to change to the first and third. I would tell everybody this: the second and fourth have not always been the way we've done. Mr. Oakley asked at the time if we change from first and third to second and fourth. So I don't have any objection to that. I would also say to the full committee that it's a situation in which any date is open to the committee. We aren't bound by anything like that. And we need one from Meg too. So if no one objects, what I'll do is starting October, just because we'll finish out the this month and then go from there. If that, does anyone have any objection to that? Then can I have a motion to change our committee dates to the first and third?
So moved.
30 seconds.
Second.
Discussion?
Chair,
Hearing
if I
none.
could,
Sure.
November would be an issue for me on the November 4th. I already have travel plans.
No, that's fine. And we'll probably have to reschedule that because that's MASC anyways, so we may just go with one that month, but I'll get back to everybody at next meeting on that. With that, we have a motion on the table and a second. All those in favor to move to the first and third, say aye.
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 Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
No problem.
Problem.
In fact, Mr. Chair, I think we ended up at the current second and fourth because I had asked for help. So, and I no longer have that commitment, so this works out really well.
If I believe I'm correct, it was the Conservation Committee.
Yeah, correct. Yep.
Okay, great. I sent everybody the letter from the MEA requesting professional contract process. So I will be sending a note out. We are going to have a workshop about contracts, as I've said, and also we'll begin that in October. That was just more informational than anything like that. Brian, do you want to talk about building committee the other day?
Yeah, it was a lengthy meeting. We heard a lot of information. We're getting down to the point where all of the contingency money asks on the part of the high school project are wrapping up, furniture and such. And then we'll be at the point where we'll be in a waiting period between October, when Fontaine will leave us, and the parking lot is done, scheduled for October 15th, until the spring. In the spring, they will come back and they will do the tennis courts and the rest of the fields out back. And then those will experience a growing season. So that's the current plan. The school building meeting, they talked about a humidity issue here at the high school. That's very concerning, and it has affected a number of wood products around the building, doors, paneling, gym floor, et cetera. And they're working diligently on solving that by decreasing the humidity and balancing the system, which was not balanced over the summer, and went through a period of bringing in humid air and conditioning it, but not dehumidifying it. So that's the issue right there with that. And hopefully that dehumidification system will be in place, and some of those issues with regard to wood expanding in the humid weather, those will go back to their regular size. And that obviously is a concern that was brought up at the meeting, and that the committee was notified of that. And we'll get an update at the next meeting, certainly. Right now, it is affecting, we're not utilizing the gym as we should because of the floor and the humidity that's caused that. So that's an issue, and it will continue to be an issue. But that was, the meeting was held yesterday afternoon, and it was well attended. Quorum was reached. It was a meeting that was both remote and in person, and that has worked the last couple of meetings in trying to make sure that we did get a quorum, because for the first time in July, we did not get a quorum because people were so busy, et cetera. So we rescheduled that meeting with the hybrid model, and now we'll continue that, I think, until such time as the meetings are over. Made it convenient for a lot of people who were in different places who couldn't make the meeting, were able to attend. For example, former school committee member Brian Giovanoni was at a job where he's an engineer, and he was working at the job, and it was impossible for him to get back to the school committee meeting, so he was able to do it from his truck, I believe. So it worked out well. So.
Any other questions? Oh, we are still under budget. So that is.
Not on schedule, but under budget.
Right. And it's gone well, so that's been good. Anything else? Anyone want to bring up anything else? Just so everyone knows, the MASC convention is November 3rd through 6th. Superintendent and I are signed up. If anyone else wants to go, it is virtual this year, or there is a wait list to go in person. So if people are interested, let me know, and we'll make sure you're signed up.
Mr. Chair, item 9. The Middlebury Education Association, the letter.
I just said that.
Oh, you did? Yeah, sorry.
No problem. I just said more for a thing.
So, sorry, so what are the times? What are the times for?
It's usually like a 10 to 4, but it's also, it's a conference. So, like 10 to 12 is 2 conference sessions to go to. So you can pick and choose, Z, whatever makes sense for you. And also, I think you'll be able to see the delegate assembly is on Saturday.
Okay.
I think you can participate by watching, but I don't believe you, obviously you can't vote.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions about that? Then with that, our next meeting is for September 23rd, and then we'll move to the 1st and 3rd. The chair is asking for an executive session tonight for 2 reasons. Procedure number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and the chair so declares, and I do declare, it's the teacher's contract. And procedure 7, to comply with or act on the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirement for the approval of executive session minutes for November 12th and February 25th. We will reconvene an open session only to close. So there'll be no other business happening here. So with that, the chair would entertain a motion for executive session.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
It requires a roll call vote. Zeke?
Aye.
Teresa?
Aye.
Greg?
Aye.
Mr. Oakley?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. So thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening.